Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Akram Bayat, and I'm hosting another talk in the Medical Image Processing in Computer Vision stream at AISC. AISC is a community of machine learning practitioners and researchers who have gathered around topics in AI research, engineering, and products. We host live sessions like this 3 to 5 times a week and produce premium content in various subject areas. To see more, please visit AI.science and log in to access slides from this and other sessions and many more. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channels, ML Explain, to get notified about all the live sessions and other contents we publish. We currently have more than 30 different streams that are focused on various ML topics, and this session is in computer vision stream. Hope you enjoy it and come back. Now it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome our speaker today, Francesco Caliva. Francesco is a postdoc at the Center for Intelligent Imaging at UCSF. He's active in the domain of machine learning and deep neural network architectures applied to medical image analysis. His goal is to combine multidisciplinary knowledge to better comprehend complex interaction among morphological, biochemical, and biomechanical factors, which altogether have a crucial role in the health of knee and shoulder joints. For this, he is interested in accelerating magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, aiming to extract relevant biomarkers directly from the undersampled MRIs. Francesco received his PhD in computing from University of Lincoln, UK, after graduating with the thesis titled A Fluid Dynamic Approach to Extract Vascular Trees in Fundus Photography. Previously, he earned a master's degree in biomedical engineering. During his academic year, he has had multidisciplinary research experience focused on lab-on-chip for liver tissue engineering and retinal vascular modeling. Francesco's talk today focuses on breaking speed limits with simultaneous ultra-fast MRI reconstruction and tissue segmentation. I welcome you, Francesco. With that said, I turn over the virtual podium to you. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction and also for the invitation for this talk, Akram. And as you said, I will present one of my latest work on task-based image reconstructions. And this work was published recently, so there will be also details at the end of the presentation. So as you mentioned, I'm with the Center for Intelligent Imaging at UCSF, and this is the list of the authors that helped me during this project. And I belong to Valentina Pedoya's laboratory. I will start first with an overview of what we will learn today. We will first discover what are the motivations behind accelerated MRI, and we will see what are the state-of-the-art approaches and what is the role of deep learning in this context. Then I'll show you some limitations of the current reconstruction methods and some possible solutions. And then I'll show you fast MRI from a slightly different perspective. And we'll discuss some of the work based on task-based reconstruction that I've been working in the lab. First of all, I think that it's good to put everything into context with a practical questions that allows us to, which is typical of our research. So we want to understand why we need to accelerate MRI in the first place. So a typical problem that we try to solve in our lab at UCSF is, can we learn features from knee MRIs that can be used to diagnose and to predict osteoarthritis, which is a very debilitating musculoskeletal disease? And what we know is that in order to achieve this goal, we need, among many other things, also the availability of high-resolution MRIs, as well as accurate tissue segmentation. And in turn, this leads to problems such as long time, which is required for scanning and annotating the images. It also requires high level of expertise and also is non-scalable and can be very expensive. So before we explore some solution to this problem per se, can we try to understand why MRI is slow? Everything comes to the MRI per se. MRI is designed to screen the Fourier transform of the image of parts of the body that we want to image. So what happens is that what we are seeing, which is here, the MRI that typically doctors look at, it's the Fourier transform of the inverse Fourier transform of the data that are acquired at the scanner level, which is this type of representation here, which is acquired in a frequency space that is also called the K-space. In order to acquire the whole K-space, what happens is that we need to sequentially traverse the whole K-space. And as you can imagine, this is actually the bottleneck of the MRI, which is the need to traverse the K-space sequentially. So how can we accelerate this process? One way could be to trivially just skip every other line of the K-space. But even if we did so, what would happen is that the resulting image is an image that doesn't look as nice as we would expect. In fact, it can present some artifacts. In this case here, we see some enfolding artifacts. So this is happening because what we are trying to do is we are going against physics, and specifically we are violating what is called the Shannon-Nyquist theorem. So at this point, the question is, can we still obtain MRIs that look as good as those that we would obtain if we acquire using fully K-space? And the answer is yes, and it has been the topic of research for many years now. So with respect to the segmentation, what we could do is to instead simply automate the segmentation. So we wouldn't need to go anymore through an expensive and tedious manual annotation. But what happens is that if we were to segment images that have been fully acquired, like in this case, where I'm showing you a high-resolution MRI of a sagittal view of a knee, here we can see, and I'm lighting in yellow the meniscal segmentation. But we see that if we try to automate the segmentation in these nice images, the performance tends to be very exciting. When instead it comes with trying to segment images that have been undersampled, what happens is that the segmentation is no more as nice as it was expected. So this proves that we need systems that are capable of reconstructing undersampled MRI, as well as perform some tasks downstream, like could be, for instance, the segmentation. This is important because they could assist radiologists or doctors in general in their evaluation, and also allows the time to reduce the time that is needed for the generation as well as the segmentation, as I just mentioned. So to begin with, let us first see what is the mathematical formulation of the reconstruction problem. This is an inverse problem, and is formulated using the equation here, which describes the forward model. And the reason why it's called the inverse problem is because what we are doing here is that we are trying to reconstruct this image X, given a set of measurement, which is the K-space Y, given some additive noise. And in this equation, we have A, which is a forward operator, which accounts for the physics involved in the MRI, and it describes the mapping from the measurement in the image space, so to the image on the raw data, or vice versa, and which in the case of the MRI is the Fourier transform. And it can also include some information related to the physics, or for instance, the codes that are utilized during acquisitions. The forward problem is an ill-posed problem, which means that there could be not just a single solution. The solution might even not exist, or could be very difficult to identify. One possible way to solve the forward problem could be to introduce some heuristics about the statistical distribution of the data that we have. And for the case of MRIs, we could assume that if there is a normally distributed noise, which makes it possible to minimize the list of squares errors between the term AX, which is our reconstruction, and Y, which is the image that we would like to obtain, or in this case would be the raw data. And in this case, this component defines what is called the data consistency term. If we try to minimize this term here, what would happen is that we would easily overfit on our training data. So we need some sort of regularization. And globally, this term creates what is called the variational model. And at this point, we kind of increase the complexity of our problem, because to some extent we have added a new component, which is the term lambda, which is used to kind of weights the regularization and the consistency term. But as well as we have now the need to create a proper regularizer. An alternative solution could be to add some information. So we can add some information about the heuristics. But another way could be, for instance, to use what is nowadays very common, is to utilize deep neural networks to learn from the data directly. And this requires less, to play less with this component, let's say. So let us see what deep learning can offer in this context. So if you recall that there is this relationship between the raw data and the image data, which is the Fourier transform, at this point we can define 4 different approaches that are utilized to accelerate MRI or for the reconstruction with deep learning. The first approach is called the image domain learning. The second is the case-based domain learning. Then we have a cascade between case-based and image domain. And ultimately, we have domain mapping or automap. What happens in the image domain learning is that we start from an undersampled case space, and with the inverse Fourier transform, we go back to the image space. And at this point, we can use convolutional neural networks to denoise this image and obtain the image that we would like to obtain. Conversely, in the case-based domain learning, all the information which are missing about the case space are filled already in the case space, and we go to the image space only once we are happy with the case space. In the cascade between case space and the image domain, there is a continuous recurrence between image space and case space. And in some extent, this is basically formulating the forward problem we saw previously. Ultimately, there is as I said, the domain mapping, where the case space is directly mapped to an image. And this is usually, for instance, in AutoMap, is done through using a fully connected layers that act as a universal domain approximator. So every approach, as you can imagine, has some pros and cons. For what is concerned the image domain learning, it has great support from the computer vision, and it's easy to interpret the images, but mainly because all the operations are happening in the image domain learning, in the image domain. But on the other hand, because we are, as I said earlier, we are violating the Nyquist theorem, what happens is that we have aliased or distorted images. And in addition to denoising this image, we need also to remove artifacts that might have been introduced by this operation. With respect to the case-based learning, we have a little bit of less interpretability or understanding of what is happening, because in case space, convolutions may have a different concept of what is in the image space, but at the same time, interpreting an image that appears like in the frequent space, it's very difficult for everyone, I would say. On the other hand, this has the advantages that we are no more introducing some distortion as we did previously in the image space, which is ideal, so we don't have that extra step of difficulty. With the cascade between case space and image domain, what happens is that we can take advantage of both pros of the image space learning and the case space learning, and also because we are formulating the forward model, so we are bringing expert knowledge to the model. On the other hand, we are require of more expertise, and is also computationally intensive, as there can be the need for iterations between the two domains. And for the last approach, which is the domain mapping or automap, The main disadvantage is the fact that we are pretty much using a fully connected layer, which can be unscalable to high image size, or for instance with 3D volumes, but also it is not considering anymore the knowledge that we have about the physics of the MRI. So it's no more considering that there is this mapping between case space and image space, which is the Fourier transform. In the work I'm going to present in the next few minutes, the approach was based on the image domain learning, and it's mainly focused by the fact that we utilize a lot of support from the computer vision knowledge that we have, and also the easier interpretability of images.
Excuse me, Francesco, I have a question.
Yes.
So between these different approach for reconstruction, which one is more explainable and interpretable in the healthcare space? Because all of these you need to kind of explain what's happening, right? When you're converting from one modality to the other one, which one actually gives more interpretable results?
Thank you. That's a very good question, and you'll see there will be some slide soon. But I think that in terms of explainability and interpretability, the main aspect that it's of great importance here, it's not actually the understanding what is the network learning, I would say, in the case of image reconstruction, but is the having clear what is the actual produced image, because you want to rely on a model, on a network that has produced images that will include all the features that are very important for diagnostic functionality of the image, I would say. So with that being said, I think that using an approach which is like a cascade network that goes between case space and image domain is an approach that has more advantages, perhaps, mainly because we have a consistency term which plays a crucial role. Let's say that we have some portions of the data that have not been acquired and portions of the data that have been acquired. So when we introduce the consistency term, we are implicitly, or actually explicitly, telling to the network which are the values that we can rely on. So because those have been acquired at the scanner. So this could be, for instance, could probably move towards the explainability that you are asking, if this answers your question. But I would.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question, and there is not a straightforward answer. It's an open problem, I would say.
Sounds good.
Yes. So what I was saying, seems like at this point we have the technology already in place, and we are ready to deploy in clinics our accelerated MRI. But in practice, this is not the case, or at least not yet. And in fact, we must claim a general warning about image translation in medical imaging, because as has been found in some papers, this can be harmful because can provide clinicians with unrepresentative images. And this can be due to the fact that if we use, for instance, image-to-image translation methods, like, for instance, in generative adversarial networks, what happens is that we are trying to match distributions between our training set and then our test set. So as a result, what can happen is that artifacts can be introduced in the image only because we need to match that distribution. So in this paper, it shows that a consequence of this can be the introduction of hallucinations. And here, for instance, on the left, I'm showing you that an image is capable of, a network is capable of changing a tumor, whereas on the right is capable of changing an image from healthy to tumoral. Let me explain a little bit better. So in the study here on the left, what happened is that there is a tumor in the initial image, but what is being altered is the presence of tumors in the training set. And what happens is that if in the training set there are no tumors present in the MRIs, a network that is trained on the distribution matching losses doesn't really reconstruct that particular tumor. So the images magically become healthy. Conversely, if all the volumes in the training set comprise tumors, then the tumors is perfectly reconstructed. Similar story happened for healthy cases, where here we have an image that is healthy, and if in the training set there were no tumors available, all the image was perfectly reconstructed without the tumor. But when all the images in the training set had a tumor in them, then the resulting image also had a tumor, which is concerning at this point. And as you can imagine, can become dangerous for clinicians, as they could be analyzing images that are not representative of the true situation. In this other study, instead, there have been the introduction of some small features in the images. For instance, here there is some text. And what is shown is that because this text is so unusual, then the network shows some instability, and the reconstruction doesn't really show sharp reconstruction of this text. And ultimately, this is a word that comes from our lab, where what happens is that we are analyzing cases in the famous fast MRI challenge, where what happened is that the best as well as the worst performing model showed this difficulty in reconstructing features that are small but not very common, but not very rare, like the meniscal tear. And this is, again, another sort of concern, because this feature should be reconstructed to allow clinicians to make a proper assessment of the health of patients. So a possible solution to this problem came from this work on adversarial robust training, where initially the network was applied through adversarial attacks. The network learned which features are difficult to be reconstructed by a reconstruction network. And then once these features have been established, there is a next step where the network is trained using robust training to focus particular attention in the reconstruction of these difficult or more difficult to reconstruct features. And it turns out that with an approach like this, the network tends to better reconstruct these sort of features, as can be seen in this difference map between the reconstruction with and without an adversarial approach in place exactly in this region here. So what it means is that we have there is a lot of work that is trying to improve the reconstruction in cases of fast MRI, but also reconstruction in general. And this problem is, I would say, further compounded by the fact that the evaluation metrics that are utilized at the current stage are not capable of capturing diagnostic abilities of the reconstructed images. And this makes it necessary to find new metrics that can help analyzing the models and to make the deployment of these systems in clinical settings safer. So while we are advancing in the field, trying to also solve this problem of instabilities, we are suggesting to restate a little bit the motivation of fast MRI, or at least look at it from a different perspective. And we could imagine it to be a tool which allows to have a new dedicated sequences which can be acquired very quickly, even in a few seconds, and provide support to the clinicians with quantitative biomarkers. And this can be utilized to describe, for instance, estimates of the volumes of organs or the thickness of tissues, and can be obtained also just by using images that are highly undersampled, which means very fast, acquired very quickly, but the result has the quality of that could be obtained on images with high resolution. And we call this approach task-based reconstruction. And in this study I'm going to present in a second, as was from the title, we do image reconstruction and segmentation simultaneously. So the question is, how could we do the segmentation on undersampled MRIs? And could be done directly from an undersampled MRI, trying to implicitly learn the features that are necessary to the segmentation. Otherwise, we can do first a step of image reconstruction and then segment, or otherwise do it simultaneously, which is the approach we take in this work, where we use deep multitask learning to achieve both reconstruction and segmentation in the image domain, and exploit the ability of network to be regularized by using multitask learning. At the same time, we are also using the higher interpretability or understanding of images in the image space. So what I'm proposing here is called TB-recon, which is the short for task-based reconstruction, and is an architecture which comprises of one shared encoder between tasks and two decoders. So how it works, the flow of the pipeline is that we have as input a zero-field MRI, and then that goes through a encoding path where there are residual blocks, similar to what happens also in a VNet-like architecture. At the bottom of the encoder, we have a common feature embedding, and then we have two decoders, which are inverted replicas of the decoder, as typical in encoder-decoders networks. And one decoder is used for the reconstruction, and one is for the segmentation. So let us see how features flow inside our network. So as you can imagine, for the reconstruction, we assume that, the intuition is that features that are coming from the encoder are super useful for the reconstruction part, as it helps to act as a denoiser. On the other hand, features that come from the encoder might lack information of the fine details that are fundamental for our segmentation, since small edges or small features might be not represented or present in the undersampled image. Therefore, we decide to have this feature flow from the between the two decoders. We call them intertask skip connections. So the intuition is that along the reconstruction decoder, features have already improved their quality, and they include also information that represent finer details, which are crucial for an accurate segmentation. And what we did is that we experimentally observed that using these skip connections between the two decoders help, in fact, the segmentation performance. But also, this is also compounded by the fact that we have a shared encoder, which is another additional point in our network. And here I'm just showing a complete overview of how the architecture look like. Since we are using, as I said, multitask learning, we are in fact utilizing a loss that represents a multitask learning approach. So we have a term that is representative of the reconstruction part, and one that is the segmentation part. And then there are some parameters, alpha, beta, and gamma, that have been empirically set to reset the importance of the two tasks, as well as rescale the losses to have to rescale the losses. And since at this point the segmentation becomes the primary goal of our approach, we are monitoring the dice similarity coefficient. With respect to training, beside the regularization that comes implicitly from the multitask approach, we also utilize early stopping and also dropout. And then another step is that we try to observe how the segmentation can convert into a biomarker estimation. And in particular, we use the segmentation map to estimate the cartilage thickness in this case. So now that we have set all the aspects of our work, let us look a little bit at the data set. So the dataset comes from the Osteoarthritis Initiative, which is a multi-center longitudinal multimodality imaging study, which comprised mostly musculoskeletal MRIs and X-rays from a cohort of just fewer than 5,000 participants, which was screened over about 100 months. And we used high resolution, for the study, we used high resolution 3D MRIs, which are particularly suitable to visualize tissues like the cartilage. And the particular acquisition we utilize is called dual echo in steady state. Then the number of the volumes come from 87 participants, which were already segmented out of this large data set. And for every participant, we had an acquisition coming at 2 different time points. So the data set came already with a split between training, validation, and test set, which we decided to maintain because it was also utilized in a segmentation challenge, which was very helpful because it allowed us to compare with other state-of-the-art approach and see how our method would compare with them. At this point is the tricky part because we are talking about image reconstruction, but I've shown you only fully sampled MRIs or high resolution. In practice, the OAI dataset doesn't come with the raw data. So what we had to do is to utilize the relationship between case space and image space to go back with a Fourier transform to the raw data, and then apply variable density Poisson disks to do the undersampling. And this can be done at different acceleration factors. In fact, we achieve up to 24 times acceleration factor. And then once we have undersampled the image with inverse Fourier transform, we can go back to our image to reconstruct and segment. In this image, in this animation, I want to show you how the segmentation, how the quality of the input image to our network is deteriorated by higher acceleration factors. And here we have another depiction of our TB-recon. But I want to show what are the comparative solutions that we utilize to compare our approach against. So the first method is, again, trained using multitask learning, where instead of having a shared encoder and then the 2 decoders, here we first in cascade do the segmentation and the, first the reconstruction and then the segmentation in cascade, but it's trained end to end. Otherwise, we have a bunch of alternative solutions which represent 2 steps, which are happening independently. The first one, it's the segmentation network, which basically was trained to segment fully sampled MRI. And the other component comes from different reconstruction networks that are used to reconstruct undersampled MRIs. So what happens that once a reconstruction, an MRI has been reconstructed, we can feed into the segmentation network and predict our cartilage segmentation. And the approaches that we use for the reconstruction here are, one is a classical L1 wavelet component sensing approach. And then otherwise we have a 2D based unit segmentation for regression, for the reconstruction. And ultimately there is another VNet for regression of the reconstructed MRI. And as we can see, as I said, they are fed into the segmentation network, which is reported above. And the segmentation network was optimized, VNet optimized to perform the task. Let us look a little bit of the results and how our approach performs. So here I'm showing you at a different acceleration rate. So at the top we have the input image, which we can see that at a fraction of the case space has basically lost all the details. And at the bottom we see a point-by-point surface distance between the automatic and the manual segmentation. But also I'm reporting the die score of the performance of that particular volume. And as we can see, even with a fraction of the case space, the degradation in performance is of roughly 2%, which is impressive considering that we are accelerating 24 times. Here I want to show instead the performance in terms of image reconstruction. It's true that I said that the reconstruction was an auxiliary task, but it's good to see how the image looked like. And I think that what is impressive here is that even at 12-time acceleration factor, we can still observe the bone marrow edema visible in this portion that is pointed by this arrow. And here another result about the segmentation, where I want to show that our proposed approach show better ability to identify the edges of our compartment. And this is true also in the meniscal horns, but also here at the patella, or here in this region of the trochlea, which are area particularly difficult to be segmented. With respect to the ablation study that we conducted, I want to show what is the effect of inter-task skip connections, as well as having in place a reconstruction step. And what I'm showing here is that if we utilize a zero fill, which means that we take an undersampled MRI, missing values are set to 0, and then we run the inverse Fourier transform, and we fed that into a segmentation network that has been trained specifically to reconstruct undersampled MRIs, we can see that high acceleration factors, like here, 24 times, for instance, segmentation in femur and tibia that presumably should be the easiest to be segmented, the network is not capable of handling this kind of data, which makes us think that the reconstruction is important as we were expecting. On the other hand, here we have this option which is called naive, where we basically remove the inter-task skip connections, and the connections are between the encoder and the decoder. So we don't have anymore the connections between the two decoders. Although both encoders, the encoder is connected with both the decoders. But as we can see here, again, the segmentation is not capable of being, the method is not capable of producing accurate segmentation on high acceleration factors. But even at lower, the performance is not really as good or comparable with our approach. So from these two experiments, we argue that both the reconstruction and the inter-task connections were crucial for the accurate segmentation that we obtained. As I promised, we had a data set that was utilized also in a challenge. So we thought about evaluating how our approach compares with other approaches. And in these slides, what you can see is that the other approaches, which are all trained, and this is important to stress on it, is that all these approaches have been trained on segmenting fully sampled MRIs, whereas this approach here, which is it starts from accept as an input an image that is 12 times undersampled. And as you can see, the performance is obviously expected to be lower than the other approach, but it's competitive with other approaches. And other approaches are also ensemble approaches, which makes it even more impressive. Here, I show you quantitatively that also the reconstruction is positively affected by the approach. In fact, it is superior, let's say, the reconstruction to all the other competitive solutions that we were analyzing. And here, what I'm showing is a Bland-Altman plot and a correlation plot between the cartilage thickness that was estimated in our following our segmentation, and it's compared with the with the cartilage thickness that is calculated from a manual segmentation. And as we can see, the difference between the manual and the automatic measure lies within the voxel size range, which again, it's incredible considering that the input was 24 times accelerated. And although here I'm showing for time and space the femoral cartilage, similar performance was obtained in other compartments, both for the tibia or for the volume, for instance, of the menisci. So I've shown you, I think, something that seems impressive, but also there are some limitations in this work. First of all, the dataset that I'm using, this is a retrospective study, which it's caused mainly by the fact that because OAI does not compress raw data, we had to use the fast Fourier transform to go back on the image, on the case space. But that means that we are not necessarily reobtaining the originally measured MRI raw data. Also, typically in clinics, images that are analyzed are multi-coil images, and doing a retrospective study inherently forced us to treat it as a single coil problem. So these are all aspects that we will be working as part of our future work or during the next steps. So at this point, I would like to go back to the initial goals of this presentation. And what we have seen is that the MRI actually requires acceleration of its acquisition. And this is necessary because of the process of in which the acquisition is performed. And there are many options out there that help, and deep learning is a great solution to obtain faster MRIs. We've also seen that deep learning in MRI reconstruction can though be very dangerous because it can introduce features or omit features in a way that is not really controlled. So we need to be really careful with the power of deep learning, and we need also to find some solutions which can guarantee realistic as well as diagnostic images. Meantime, I think that deep task-based reconstruction is a promising tool for accelerating MRI and potentially also obtain some dedicated acquisition, which could take advantage of very high acceleration factors. In this study, we are proposing a task-based approach to image reconstruction and cartilage segmentation. And what we show is that by introducing a single encoder and inter-task skip connections between the two decoders, we can improve both the quality of the image reconstruction as well as the segmentation. And we also show that this has potential in being utilized in the estimation of biomarkers that typically could be utilized for studying osteoarthritis, monitoring it, but also it could be applied to other pathologies. Some final food for thought that I would like to give is that overall it is very important to highlight some crucial points, some points that I think are crucial for a safe deployment of deep learning in medical image reconstruction. In fact, we must understand the responsibility that would fall in the algorithm, but also primarily in who designed and deployed the algorithms. So we need certainly more realistic metric or stronger metric that could safely evaluate the final product that we obtain, because obviously we don't want to be fooled by a number that says that an image looks good or amazing, and then in practice we are just missed a tumor in the reconstruction. And for this, reliability and trust on the evaluation metric has to be key. So this is a reference to our work that I presented today, and I'm very happy to receive emails or any question about it. Here I report a list of the reference which I didn't introduce during the presentations, and there are a few more. And as you can imagine, the literature is very vast, and I apologize for not being able to include everyone. And I would like to ultimately thank my research team and the funding sources and the opportunities that has been given to me by my PI, Valentina Pedoia, but also by, would like to thank also Victor Chang, with who I co-authored part of the work I presented today. And also I would like to thank everyone for your kind attention, and I'm happy to take or answer any of your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Francesco. It was very great presentation and very informative. So I have a question. So regarding the evaluation of your methods, you had the results of computational evaluation that shows that task-based approach works well. But how about the clinical evaluation of your method? Did you do the clinical evaluation to make sure your method works well or not?
Thank you. This is a very good question. And actually, I have to say that in the paper, we report also, I didn't include it in these slides. We did also a reader study where the two readers, radiologists, went through the images and they evaluated the quality of the images that after reconstruction. And they, among the evaluation criteria, there was also the diagnostic ability. So yes, we did that sort of evaluation as well, and it's surprisingly that the results were very promising and positive.
Oh, great. And what big challenges do you see for this work to be deployed in clinical setting?
So at the moment, I think that the main challenge comes from two aspects. One is the need to the type of data that we used in this work. It's really like let's say a pilot study. So as I said, the data that we used were not really raw data. So the first challenge is to really utilize data that come from the scanner, so the real raw data. And with that being said, there are another big challenge could be the ability to make, as you can imagine, like the need for a real-time application could be another aspect. But we also know that usually deep learning approaches might be a bit slow in training, but then at inference time, they are super fast. So that shouldn't really be a problem for deployment. I would say probably another challenge could be the, I would say it's mostly in the acquisition. In order to accelerate it might require some dedicated patterns that might require some sort of, I say, optimization in terms of for the generation of the ideal undersampling pattern, which in an ideal world would be optimized optimized for each patient. So accelerating that aspect would definitely be key.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was, yes, great presentation. I appreciate. And thank you everyone for joining us. And please visit AI.science and log in to access the slides from this and other sessions and many more. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, ML Paper Explain, to get notified about all live sessions and other free content we publish. Hope to see you all in our next talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much.